today's episode of Revolve Commercial. I'm your co-host and non-commercial expert, Samantha Riley, alongside Mish, who is our commercial real estate expert along for the ride. Mish, I'm very excited because this is the first episode of a very special 7-part series that you've put together that's walking people through how to invest in commercial property from A to Z. Like, this is super cool.
Yes, Sam, this is a long time coming. We basically put together an education series quite a long time ago. And to be quite honest with you, I think we've been so head down, bums up, doing all the properties and acquiring properties and helping people. And my thing is mentoring, because I really love teaching and mentoring. And I've got to the stage where I've decided, you know what, let's talk about the education series, because it's out there. And when clients come on board, we give this to them free of charge. It's part of the package. And it's such a brilliant little series on, as you said, everything you need to know, from searching properties, finding the right properties, what to look for, how to look for them, right through to A to Z, right through to settling the property, what you need to know when you settle the property, the steps you need to take, and then management, which is the most important. And a lot of people think that management is just like secondary, and I always say management's never secondary in commercial property. It's an integral part of ensuring that your property maintains its value. And if anything, add value as you go. So it really is A to Z and everything in between.
I love this. It's going to be super cool. Today, we're going to talk about really the foundational pieces. Like, what do you want your commercial property to do for you? Because I know that, and you see this in any industry, people just think, oh, I'm either going to do it or I'm not, and they dive headfirst in. And as you talk about on this podcast all the time, you really need to know the intricacies and the nuance to make sure that you're doing this in the right way. And I think that from what you have told me, that most investors actually, when they decide they want to invest in commercial property, they go straight to, well, let's find a property. But yeah, I think that you've got a better question to start with.
Well, I think most people that I speak to, they say, oh, yeah, they've been looking at commercial real estate, and they've been, and sometimes they actually send properties through to me, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. And the big question is, why, Mish? What is it about the property? How could you tell in 10 minutes that that's not the property? So what we're really wanting to teach and for people to learn is to pick up that skill of knowing what the right property is. And I think the most important thing is, what is your goal? What do you actually want to achieve? So why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want generational wealth? Are you doing this just because you want quick flip deal and you want cash flow out of it? Is it a property that you want to buy, you want to uplift, you want to put back on the market in 12 to 24 months? And if that is the strategy, how are you going to do that? What does it take? What's it going to cost? And everything in between. Or is this a property that you want to add to your portfolio? And perhaps you have a couple of residential properties. First time you're buying commercial property, you want to add something that is a real set and forget asset that is going to take you into the next 10 to 20 years. And what does that look like, and why would a particular asset be correct for that type of portfolio? So we break it down into the various different strategies. And I mean, I'm just touching on 3 or 4 strategies on this, but there's a multitude of strategies in the back end that we look at and discuss. And in the education program, you have the ability to decide on what the strategy is and how you're going to look for that, and how you're going to look for that property, and what you're going to do with that property ultimately.
Love it. Let's start to break down this first episode and dive a little bit deeper into what is your goal. Could we start off by talking about the cash flow versus the capital growth and how to choose which is your primary driver? Like, why is it important to know this up front?
Look, Sam, and it's pretty much like we've been talking about, let's talk about cash flow, income versus capital growth. So your cash flow would be a property that is yielding a slight positive yield, where from day one, you are, let's say, for instance, purchasing a property at 6% and your yield is at that 6% and you are getting a reasonable cash flow for it. So in other words, it's a positive cash flow. You might have some people on the other instance that don't necessarily need a positive cash flow, that they're okay with a little bit of negative gearing. However, in 12 to 24 months, they'd be happy if their property converted to positive cash flow. And what I mean by that is, let's say for argument's sake, you're purchasing a class tenancy property, a medical property, which is yielding 4.8%. You plug in quite a lot of cash into that, and you're slightly negative on it. But you know that the incremental increases on that property, 4%, it's in a growing area, rental's going to be going up, and within 12 months' time, that property is going to be maybe a 5 or a 5.5% property. And what you're doing there is you're purchasing longevity. You're purchasing a long-time set and forget property that can stay in your portfolio for 10 to 20 years. It's medical. It's highly sought after. So you know that you're buying it at quite a competitive rate, hence your yield being fairly low. But your cash flow long-term is going to be fairly substantial. Okay, so that would be your income. If we're talking capital growth, you're looking for an A-class property close to, let's say, CBD. So it could be a multitude of different types of property, industrial, maybe an ASX listed company. Maybe it's a fast food type company, a Kentucky or a McDonald's or one of those type properties, which are fairly tight yields, but it's in an area where you know that area is gentrifying fast. So you're prepared to hold on to that property. You can afford to hold on to it at a fairly compressed yield in order to achieve that outcome down the road. We look at what drives you, and that would be, what is your requirement? What do you need?
Tell us about a time, and this may and probably hasn't been a client of yours or someone that you didn't work with. Tell us about a time that you saw someone purchase a property, maybe it was someone that came to you afterwards, that chose the wrong strategy for what was better for them at the time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I can think of quite a number of case studies, in fact, where somebody came along and spoke about what they wanted, and when we started the process, they decided that they don't need the education, that they know enough, and they're just going to go off and buy a property. And what they did is they went and they bought a property in regional area with a relatively high yield because they wanted cash flow and fast, but they didn't do their homework on it, and within 2 years, the tenant vacated the property. Now, this was a medical property. The one that I'm thinking of in particular was a medical property. It was very high yielding. They bought their property at about 8.5% because it was medical, number one, and because it was regional, number two. And what they saw in the property is longevity, and that tenant would definitely never move out because it's medical. They've put a lot of expense into the fit out, but they didn't do their homework. and they overpaid for the property. And their homework was that the medical business was actually in the process of purchasing land and building another building to move their property into. But they didn't do the homework, and at the end of the 2 years, it was definitely the wrong move. So they were buying their property as a long-time set and forget property, and within their 2-year period, or let's say after their 2-year period, they were stuck with a vacant property, and their property dropped by 30%. The value dropped by 30%, and they couldn't put another medical property tenant in there. So, those are the kind of things that you really got to be careful about.
Let's talk about the apprehension scale. You've told me that there's like a 1 to 10 apprehension scale for getting started in commercial property. How do people overcome that initial fear?
Sam, I'm going to say the more you know, the easier that's going to be. So the more you know and the more experience you have. And it's like anything, it's like shooting hoops with a basketball. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So the apprehension scale, we always ask our customers on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in terms of fear or being fairly adventurous? And that would give us an indication. Then we'd have a conversation around what it is and what is holding them back. So in other words, the fear, which I know that what I've got to do is spend more time with them, nurturing them and getting them educated. So here again is why we developed the education training to give you that basis, the foundation of what you need to know in order to get educated and in order to feel more confident when you see something. So you would recognize that actually that's a really good asset. And it takes you through every single step, 1 to 12, and all the lessons in between to give you that confidence of say, actually, we learned this in lesson number 7. This is all about compliance, or we learned it in lesson number 5, which is a full comprehensive section on due diligence, where there's a lot more modules in that lesson. So the more you know, the closer you're going to be to a 10. The less you know, you're going to be close to that 1, and you're going to have high apprehension, high fear.
Let's talk about ownership. This is something that I've always been super intrigued around, how to structure the ownerships, as in, do you buy it in your own name, a family trust, a company, maybe a self-managed super fund? Why is it important to make sure that you get the structure right before you even, think about what's next?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Sam. Think about what you want. So it's like anything. Think about what your outcome is first. What do you want this property to be achieving for you, and by when? And that would determine what kind of structure you want to put it into. So are you purchasing this property because you want it to sustain your retirement? So do you have enough funds in your self-managed super fund? What does that mean? What is that property going to look like in your self-managed super fund, bearing in mind that whatever you put in there stays in there? You can't draw any equity out of it. In fact, I was chatting to a client very recently who has a very nice property in his self-managed super fund. The property has doubled in price over the last 8 years. Now he wants to draw some funds out of it and wants to purchase it again. Although he likes the property, he loves the property, he'd like to keep the property, but he can't do a drawdown on it. So did he make a mistake by putting it in his self-managed super fund? He can decide on that. But ultimately he's saying, Mish, I'd love to use those funds to purchase my next commercial property. So his decision is to either sell it. He could sell it to himself, but he still pays the stamp duties and CGTs on that? Or do you want to buy it in a company and a trust? Do you want something that you can pass down to your kids? Bearing in mind that every time you change ownership of the property, you're going to be paying stamp duty. So you need to really sit down with your accountant and decide early in the piece what entity is going to be perfect for you to buy this in. Is it going to be your own name? Is it going to be a family trust? Is it going to be your super fund? Is it going to be a company and trust structure? We've got some clients that are purchasing property for as owner occupiers. What does that look like? So in their company, or in a separate company and trust, so that they can offset profits and losses. We've got some people that are buying properties in partnerships. And what does that look like? And what do those buying entities look like? Totally separate entities that are buying one property. How does that look? So that is very, very important that you decide up front before you start this journey. And I always say, name it. Give it a name. Get your entities ready, because when these properties come up, they come up fast, and you need to put your name on it straight away. You don't have time to say, oh, wait, hold on. Because if there are 10 buyers behind you, they're just going to go, hey, boom, done deal.
Yeah, mine, done.
Yeah. Sorry you had to snooze on that one.
You snooze, you lose.
So when people start out straight away, I always say to them, look, if you made a decision, you're going to buy a property, set up a trust, set up an entity, set up whatever your buying entity is, get your ducks in a row. You know, if you want to buy it in a self-managed super fund, that takes quite a long time to set that up. It could take from 4 to 8 weeks, because if you need a bare trust in your self-managed super fund, that takes even longer. And then you're waiting for your accountant, and you're waiting for legislation, all sorts of things, you know, documentation, all that kind of stuff. Set it up, be clear, have your vision on all of these steps before you even start.
Let's talk about understanding your personal operational ceiling. There, I got it out. And this is around whether you want to self-manage your property or whether you're looking for a passive investment. Can you give us some context around understanding your personal operational ceiling? Interesting
question, Sam, because we have various different types of people that are purchasing property. Now, my perspective is I'm too busy to manage my own property. And realistically, if you've never managed a commercial property before, use a property manager, because it doesn't just stop there. It's not the same as managing a residential property. Commercial property has a lot of compliance. It's got a lot of reports, safety reports. It's got a lot of lease adjustments, incremental increases. And if you're missing out on doing those things right, you could be leaving money on the table. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is all about cash flow. So you want to do it as optimally as possible. If it's something small and simple and easy to manage, and you've got experience in managing your own properties, then yes, you could do it. I find that 99% of people that decide that they want to self-manage their property end up either losing money on it within, and you only really realize that you're losing income, that you're leaving money on the table, within about 24 to 36 months. So you've lost 3 years worth of income, okay? Whereas if you hand it over to specialists who do commercial renting, and I'm going to stress commercial renting. Don't ever give your commercial property to residential agents. Biggest mistake. Biggest mistake. I see this happening over and over again, and I say, don't do it. Yeah. You know, it's a little bit like like getting a mortgage from a residential mortgage broker. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So biggest fundamental mistake. Go with a professional, somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who's going to give you your budgets and your reports and your increases and your projection for the next 12 months. Somebody who knows how to do all of that right from the get-go.
Now, what's really interesting, Mish, I'm gonna out myself here. When I was looking through these notes, and I just want to stress, this is not my area of expertise. I'm purely here to ask the expert the questions. But I was like, why do we want to understand our personal operational ceiling, like in the foundational aspects? But what I heard right then is you need to know these things in advance so that you can do your numbers before you even start looking at properties. And that only just dropped in for me when you were answering, because I was like, this is a really weird question to be like covering off in this episode. But essentially, what it brings straight to mind is we don't know what we don't know. And this is so why we have to go to the expert, because I wouldn't have even thought that that was something to consider when I'm thinking about my actual goals. And it all just started to, like the penny dropped. Oh, I need to know that now so that I can do my numbers before I purchase the property.
Absolutely, 100%, Sam. The more you know up front, the better. And you hit you said it there. You don't know what you don't know. You can assume, but we all know that assume means
Making an ass of you and me.
There we go. Thank you. So yeah, the more you know, the more you can get educated. It's a little bit like you're not going to go to your dentist to get your car fixed, So get educated on the topic that you want to learn about, that you want to specialize in, because realistically, when you're investing in commercial real estate, you really do want to get deeper and better at it so that you understand more, and essentially you're specializing in it, really.
Totally.
You can stick your toe in and start with your first one, a small one, but as you progress, you want to get more and more educated. And this is the kind of topic that this is the area that I'm still learning, Sam. I never stop learning, because every single deal that we do is different. It's got a different twist to it. It's got a different, I'm busy working on one at the moment where, and I'll just give you a quick case study. Lovely property, one of 3 properties, so they're next door to each other. One's vacant, 2 are tenanted, and the 2 that are tenanted by the same tenant. So in other words, the one tenant has taken over 2 units. And I've been asking the right question because I've picked up, and it's just a sixth sense that you pick up as you work with it, that there was, I asked whether it was a lease back. And the agent actually said to me, no, it's not a lease back. However, the owner of the business recently sold the business. So it's not a lease back, but it's an acquisition and a sale, which tells me straight away that the tenant that's in there has only been running the business for 10 months. And the first thing I said to her is, would they be able to show us their profits and losses? And she said to me, but why would you want to see that? And I said, well, look, I understand that they would have bought the business based on the previous owner's profits and losses, but what does the current tenant look like? What does their business look like? Because we've got no runs on the board. The previous seller has set up the lease, but can the current tenant afford that lease for the next 5 years? So they're little nuances, that they're little things that you learn to ask, and you learn to know the longer that you work in it. And this is education, people. It is education. Ask questions. Have a mentor. Have somebody who you can speak to and ask and ask and ask these questions. But you need to know the right questions to ask.
Yeah. It's easy to say ask the questions, but if you don't know the questions there, you can't ask it. And I think that's the most important piece to take away.
Mm.
But in saying that, I'm super excited because over the next 6 episodes, you're going to be unpacking so much information around navigating titles to secrets of leasehold and crown land investments, all the way through to things like due diligence, commercial finance funding, and so much more. So definitely tune in next week where Mish will start unpacking all of these super important points that you need to learn when investing in real estate, commercial real estate. But today, what I really took away, Mish, is really understand what the goal is before we dive in. It's not where do we find a property or how much is the property. It's why are we doing this? That's my takeaway.
Absolutely.
I love that you discussed foundations and goals today. It's super important. Can you give us a little insight into what you're going to be covering in the next episode of this special 7-part series?
Okay, Sam. So we're going to be going through the entire education in the next 7. Well, let's call it the next 6 parts. And next week we're going to be discussing finding the right commercial property and how to do that. And I think the most important thing is interpreting the information memorandum. So when you find a property, you reach out to the agent, and the first thing you do is ask them for an information memorandum, how to interpret that information memorandum, and what to do with that information.
Love it. So definitely tune in to the next episode. Thanks for joining us for another week. And Mish, thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you, Sam, yet again. Always a pleasure. And yes, if people want to know more, they can click on the show notes and get more educated.
Love it. See you next episode.
Thanks, Sam.